In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to model, rig, and animate an idle and run animation just like this for a low poly character in Blender. And then I'm going to also show you how to implement that character into a simple third-person controller with smooth animation transitions just like you're seeing here in Godot 4. I do not recommend this tutorial for people that have zero experience with Blender or Godot. But if you have at least a slight introduction to either of them, I think you should be able to get through this and hopefully learn something. So if you want to get started, the only thing you're going to need is a turnaround reference. So I Googled human turnaround for this, and I'm going to be using just the first result right here as a reference for modeling the character. So go ahead and get yourself one of those, and then you can get started. Okay, let's get started by setting up our reference images. I'm going to press A, X, and delete everything. Then let's drag in the turnaround reference. I'll click it, Alt-R, and Alt-G to reset the rotation and location to the origin. And then R, X, 90, enter. Shift-D to duplicate it. R, Z, 90, and this will be the front view, this will be the side view. So now let's position those. So if I press numpad 1, I'll go to the front view. I'll click it, GX, and then let's position this so that it's centered. You can hold shift to be a bit more precise with your positioning. That's pretty good. Numpad 3 to go to the side view. Let's do the same thing with the side view now. GY, and shift, and that's pretty good. Now we also want to bring it so that the feet are at the level of the origin, so I'll just drag across to get both of these. G, Z, shift, that's pretty good. And then we just want to move them away from the origin so that we actually have room to make the model. So I'll click the front-facing one, G, Y, I'll hold Control and drag it 4 units away. And with the side view, GX, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, that's pretty good. Shift A, go to Mesh, Cube, back to the front view, GZ, drag it up here. This cube is 2 meters tall, and we are going to want this human to be a little bit shorter than 2 meters. So I'm going to click this and then shift click this one. Go up here and click 3D cursor, and then I'll go back to the front view, Alt-Z to go to X-ray mode so you can see through the cube. And then let's scale both of these down so it's a little bit shorter than the cube. All right, so our reference is set up, and now we can start the actual model. Let's model the torso first. So click the cube, press tab to go into edit mode, numpad 1 for front view, Control R for a loop cut, left click, right click to keep it centered. Box select these vertices on the left. Press X and delete the vertices. Now we're going to add a mirror modifier, so click the wrench, add modifier, mirror, and then select clipping to be true. With clipping true, it just makes it so that the middle stays connected. If clipping weren't, you could separate it like that, so we want to keep clipping on. And let's try to start this torso here, so I'll drag it in like this, scale Z. Oh, change this from 3D cursor back to medium point, scale Z, okay, GZ, side view, oh, SY, okay. And then I'm gonna add some loop cuts here. So Control R right here, and then mouse up twice, left click, right click. And then I am just gonna go through box selecting these vertices, trying to position them according to this character. Okay, that's pretty good for the front view. I'm going to press numpad 3 to go to the side view now. And I'm going to try to do the same thing now, just box select and try to move it to this outline. Okay, so I pressed Alt-Z just to come out of X-ray mode and take a look. This is looking pretty good so far, but I'm gonna make just some minor adjustments to make it look a little bit better. Okay, all I did was just move some of these vertices back a little bit, and this one back as well in the y-axis, just to make it look a little bit more rounded. But I am pretty happy with this overall, so we're going to leave it there, and we will move on to the limbs. Make sure you're still in edit mode. I'm going to go to the front view, turn X-ray back on with Alt-Z, Shift-A, cube, and I'll scale this down quite a bit, and I'll move it up here. Actually, I'm going to turn clipping off first, because these need to be separated. And I'm going to select the top vertices, scale it down, take these bottom ones, move it up a little bit, scale that down a little bit, press E to extrude, bring this down a ways, scale that down. Okay, now I'll click anywhere just to deselect all of that. Now I'll go mouse over one of these vertices and press L to select all of the linked geometry, and then Shift D. This will be our bicep area, this will be our forearm, and then Shift D again. This can be used for the leg as well. So we're gonna focus on the arm first. So I am going to just grab this and try rotating it and just kind of positioning it again loosely based on this outline. Okay, that looks alright for the front view. I'm actually going to grab these shoulder vertices and drag them out just a little bit farther. I want them to be covered a little bit more. Then I think I'll move this up a little bit, GZ. Yeah, I think I like that more. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Okay, you can see I just kind of stuck it inside the other one. That's one thing with low poly models that you'll see a lot. You'll just have shapes just kind of sticking into the other ones. They don't need to necessarily be linked together. So I'm going to go to the side view now. And for this turnaround, you can see the arms over here. So I'm going to select both of these and drag them over here for a moment. So have everything deselected. L, just make sure that you're next to one of the vertices for that geometry. G, Y, and then I'll line up that shoulder. So we just need to rotate this bottom piece a little bit. So L for that, rotate, G, Y. Okay, I'm gonna adjust this just a little bit. And I'm going to take a look at this, GZ. We don't want any of these edges to overlap like this, so I'm going to press G, left click on this edge here to select this loop, and scale it down a little bit. And that looks a little bit better to me. I'm going to go back to X-ray, and I'm just going to press 2 to go to edge mode, select all these, and scale that in a little bit too, just to make sure that that edge thing doesn't happen anymore. And I'll select this edge, and then GZ, just bring it up a little bit. And I think we should be fine. Actually, just to be safe, I'll move it up just a little bit higher. Yeah, okay, all right, but enough of that. Moving on to the hand. Press 3 to go to face select. I'm gonna go back to the front view, I'll extrude this with E to about there. And then 2 for edge select, take that outer edge, scale it up a good amount, kind of like that. And then this inner edge, I'll scale it up, not quite as much. Not quite as much, okay. Then I'll move this out the other way with GX, and this down a little bit. And I want it to kind of be like inward a little bit, not so parallel with it, so I'll select all those bottom edges, GX. Then I gotta bring this guy down a little bit. Okay, and then I'm just gonna move him up a little. Okay, that's pretty good. So I'm going to go back to side view, box select all of this, GY, drag that back into place. Okay, and those are our arms. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the legs. So let's do the same thing. I'll use this one and try to position it loosely with this upper leg. Okay, and while we're in the front, I'm just going to do the same thing with the lower leg. Okay, can't very easily match the curvature here, but that's fine. You know, it's a low poly model. Let's go to the side view and line this lower leg up a bit better. I'm going to make this calf pop just a little bit more by putting in a loop cut right here. So left click, right click, that's Control R to make a loop cut. And I'll do GZ just to make it line up with this point here, this farthest point out of the calf. Box select this vertex, G, Y, just drag that out. And then that looks just a bit more interesting. And then we're just going to do the feet. So go to face select with 3, select this bottom face, go to side view, E to extrude, bring that down to the floor, select the front face, back to side view, E to extrude, right there. 1 to go to vertex select, GZ, bring this down, let's go to front view, let's drag GX, these guys out here. And one thing that I really like to do is we'll take this top vertex, then shift click this bottom one here on the outer corner of the foot, then press M at last, and merging those together makes a nice looking foot in my opinion. So, okay, that is the limbs. There we go. Okay, to finish the modeling, we are just going to need to make the head and the neck. So make sure you're still in edit mode. Let's go to front view, shift A, cube, scale it way down. Control R, let's put a vertical loop cut, left click, right click, box, select the vertices on the left, X, delete the vertices, and let's turn clipping back on. So let's select all of these. And GZ, drag it up here. Okay, then I'll drag these in a little bit more. Okay, nice. And I'm gonna put 2 loop cuts in here. So Control R, I'm gonna put a vertical one in right here, left click, right click, and Control R, horizontal one as well, left click, right click. Back to front view. And I'm just gonna try to position things again, like we've been doing this entire time. Okay, that's a good start. Let's go to the side view and do the same thing. All right, so with the head, it's a little bit more complicated, and I'm definitely gonna have to make some changes here, but first, one thing that I want to do is, in order to make things a little bit more circular, I'm gonna do, so click to deselect everything, L to select all of this, linked geometry, Shift S, cursor to selected, press N, go to view, turn the 3D cursor X location to 0, and then I'm going to turn this pivot to the 3D cursor again. And now I'm going to select some of these vertices that I want to pull into the 3D cursor. And I'm going to do this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then I'm going to press S and drag in. And already I feel like that's starting to look a lot better. Okay. I don't love how pointy this chin is, so I'm going to drag that up a little bit. And I'm going to bring this down a little bit as well. It really doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to leave X-ray mode just to get a better look at this. Yeah, I mean, that could be just fine. Tab. I do want to make it a little bit bigger, so SX. SC. I want to just mess with it a little bit more, I think. GZ. Actually, no, I'm going to call it there for the head. I'm going to say that's fine. So front view, side view. Just going to rotate it just a touch. Position it right like that. Okay, and now I promise I'm actually done. Okay, now just the neck, and then we are completely finished. So cube, scale it way down. Well, first I'm going to put a loop cut in again. Left click, right click, get rid of those vertices. Okay, L to select linked geometry. Go to front view, scale it down again, G to move. Okay, that's pretty good. And just position it like we've been positioning everything, like this. I like to have the neck kind of shrink in size a little bit as it goes to the top. I feel like that makes it look a little bit better. And let's take a look at what we got. So leave X-ray mode. Oh, this is going to have to go up a little bit. GZ. Oh, we're going to want to bring that in. So back to X-ray mode. Let's just select all of these. I'm just going to shift select all of these vertices. Go back to median point, scale that down a little bit. And then GZ, bring that up. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to call it there for the model. Hopefully yours looks something like this. And next we can move on to rigging it. Before rigging this model, I'm just going to take care of one thing here, and that is I'm going to set this object origin to the world origin here. So make sure that you're in object mode. Press Shift S, cursor to world origin, then click the model, then right click, set origin, origin to 3D cursor, and the origin should be down here then. And this is going to be helpful for when we import the model to Godot. Then I'm just going to go ahead and hide these references by clicking these eyes, and now we can start rigging. Okay, for rigging, make sure that you're in object mode, press Shift A, then go to armature. And I'm going to go into front mode. I'm going to click this little green guy tab down here, go to viewport display, then click in front just so you'll always be able to see these bones. Press GZ with the entire bone selected, and I'll move this up so that that's at the pelvis area. And then I'm going to go into edit mode, make sure this top part is selected, GZ, and then I'll move that down to where the neck connects. And then for a bone for the head, I'm going to press E to extrude, Z to lock to the Z axis, and drag it up to the top of the head. Now let's make a bone for this left arm. Click the whole thing, drag it up there, make sure it matches up with the shoulder. And we want it to be right about where this crease would be. I'll move this up a little bit to match better with the shoulder. All right, click this end part here, the elbow, E to extrude, bring that down to about the wrist area. I'm not gonna make a bone for the hand. And now let's do the leg. Shift A again, position that at the top of the leg. Whoops. G to move that down. Okay, move this up just a little bit. That looks pretty good. E to extrude again, down to the ankle. And I will make a foot bone, so E to extrude that down as well. Okay, that's pretty good. Now let's just go to the side view, numpad 3, and position these a little bit better. So G, Y, I'll move this head bone forward a little bit. G, Y, I'll move this neck connection area back a little bit. I want to move this shoulder back, this elbow back a little bit, make sure that it's just that's selected. All right, and this wrist area here, I'm going to move forward a bit as well, just so it's right in the middle. Okay, and for the legs, this top part of the leg looks pretty good. For the knee, that's pretty good for the knee actually. For the ankle, I'll move this back. And for the foot, I'll move it forward like that. Okay, and I am just going to move the top of this leg back. Whoops, right there. Just a little bit, because later when we're setting up inverse kinematics, it's good to start with a little bit of a bend like this in the leg. Okay, so let's set up these two bones to be children of the root bone, so that when the body rotates, the arm and the legs will rotate with it and be affected by that. So click this upper arm bone, shift left click this bone, and then press Control P, make parent keep offset, do the same thing for the upper leg bone, keep offset. All right, perfect. Now we just want to go through and name the bones, so we can click them one at a time. F2, I'll call this one head. F2, I'll call this one body. I'll call this one upper arm, and we're going to mirror these bones over to the right side, so it's important that for these you do .L, upper arm .L, lower arm .L, upper leg .L, lower leg .L, and foot .L. Okay, and that is a good start to the rigging of this character. If I go to this menu in the top left and then select pose mode, I can click any of these bones, press R, move my mouse around, and then right click just so that it resets. And I can start noticing these child-parent relationships with the bone rotations. And if you click this body bone and press G, you can see all the other bones move with it. But if I press GZ on it, move it down, it would be nice if these feet stayed planted. That would make animating things a lot easier. So we can do that by setting up something called inverse kinematics on the legs, which we're going to set up now. So I'm going to go back to edit mode, numpad 3 to go to the side view, click this knee joint, EY to extrude this forward, and then I'll click this bone, Alt P, clear parent, and I'll move it forward. This bone for the inverse kinematics is going to dictate which way the knee is facing, so I'll show that a little bit later. I'm going to name it F2, IK leg pole .L, make sure you don't forget the .L, and back into side view, this heel, EY, I'll move this back, and again, Alt P, clear parent, and I'll call this one IK leg target.l. Okay, so let's go back into pose mode, and let's click this lower leg here, and you should see this blue bone menu here, and we're going to add a bone constraint to the lower leg. So go ahead, add bone constraint, inverse kinematics, target armature, bone is going to be ik leg target.l, pull target, select armature again, ik leg pull.l, and don't freak out. Chain length, set this to 2, and pull angle, set this to 90 degrees. And one last thing, for both of these bones, go to that green bone menu and uncheck deform for both of them. So now, if I grab this body bone, press G, and move it around, the heel is staying put, but you can still see that the foot is bending forward through the floor. So we're going to set up one more bone constraint, and that is going to be on this foot. First, click the green bone menu and go to Relations, and then uncheck Inherit Rotation. And then let's actually add the constraint. So add bone constraint, copy rotation, target armature, bone, ik leg target.l. Target and owner, set both of these to local space. And we want this bone, this foot bone, to inherit the rotation of this ik leg target. So if I try it on the different axes, that looks pretty good in X. RY, though, it seems to be kind of the opposite direction, and it's the same thing with RZ. So clicking that foot bone, here I'm going to invert Y and Z, and then everything seems to rotate properly. Okay, so now if I move this down and I can move this pole around, this is going to make things a lot easier for animating things. I'm going to select everything, Alt-G, Alt-R, just to make sure that everything's back to normal. And the last thing that we're going to do is create the bones for the right side. And if you followed that .L convention properly, this is actually pretty easy. So I'll open the edit mode, press A to select all of the bones, and then I'll right-click on the armature, and then click symmetrize. And there we go. If I go back to pose mode, you can see all of these work perfectly. All right, awesome. The last thing that we need to do in order to finish rigging is make it so that the mesh actually deforms along with the skeleton bones. So let's do that. First, in pose mode, I'm just going to press A to select all the bones, Alt-R and Alt-G just to make sure everything is back to its starting position. Then let's go back to object mode up in this top left menu, click the mesh and then shift click the armature, press Ctrl P, and then select armature deform with empty groups, and then select just the mesh, press tab to go into edit mode, and Alt-Z to go into X-ray mode. And now we just need to assign these vertices to its corresponding vertex group, which there's one per bone. So for example, these body vertices, I'm going to go near one of these vertices, press L to select all the linked geometry, and then I go down to this object data menu here, and then there is a body vertex group. So I'll assign all of these to the body vertex group by clicking assign. And in order to check what is assigned to what group, just deselect everything, have what group you want to check selected here, and then click select, and it'll show you what vertex is in what group. You want to make sure that you don't assign any of these to the wrong group, because your animations are going to start looking really weird if that happens. So let's move on to the head. So I'll go near one of the head vertices, L, one of the neck vertices as well, and press L. Assign both of those to head. For upper arm.L, select that, and then assign to upper arm.L. Do the same thing with lower arm.L, and the same thing with upper leg.L. Whoops, leg.L, assign. And for lower leg.L, I don't want to assign these bottom vertices. I want that to be for the foot. So I'm just going to shift left click to deselect all of those vertices. I'll assign the rest to lower leg.l, and then I will just box select all of those and assign them to foot.l. So I'll leave X-ray mode with Alt-Z and then go back to object mode with tab. Select the armature, go back into pose mode, and now the mesh should be deforming properly. All right, now we can move on to animation. Now that the character is rigged, go ahead and click Animation up at the top. I'm going to zoom in on both of these displays. Click this dope sheet drop down over here and then select Action Editor. Click New, and let's call this Default. Click this shield icon. This just makes it, as far as I'm aware, so that Blender doesn't delete any data about the animation, even if it's not being used or something like that. Everybody always clicks the shield, so I just click it too. Press A up in this window. Make sure that you're in pose mode here. Then press I and click Location, Rotation, and Scale. So now we just have a default pose for the skeleton that will ship along with the other animations once we export it. Click New Action here, and let's make an idle animation. I'll call it idle underscore loop. The underscore loop in this animation name makes it so that when we import this character into Godot, it will automatically recognize this as a looping animation. If we didn't add this to the end of the name, we would just have to set it to loop by hand. So this is a pretty good starting pose for the idle animation. I am going to select auto keying down here, and auto keying just makes it so that when I rotate and position these bones, Blender will automatically assign them as keyframes. This way I don't have to press I and insert keyframes by hand every time. So for this first frame, I'm just going to bring these arms in a little bit. So R, Y, kind of straighten them out like that. Okay. Then I'll go to frame 20, and I'm going to bring this body down a little bit. So I'll click the body bone, GZ, just bring it down a little bit like that. And then I'll bring the arms back out, RY, just like that. Okay, pretty good. I'll press A to select all the bones again. Then down in the animation timeline, I'll press A twice to deselect everything. I'll click this top dot here on summary just to select everything in this frame. Then press Shift D and then drop everything here on frame 40. Go down to the bottom right and change the end frame to 39. You want it to be one frame before frame 40. This is just how you set up looping animations in Blender. And let's press spacebar to see how it looks. I don't really like how the knees are kind of pointed inward, so we can fix that by dragging these inverse kinematic leg poles out a little bit. So let's do that. I'll press spacebar to stop the animation, and I'll just select these poles. And then down here, press A to select all of these frames, X, and I'll delete all of these keyframes. Go back to frame 1, and then for each of these, I'll just click this one, GX. I'll drag it out a little bit, and then for this one, GX, drag that out in the opposite direction. All right, then let's press spacebar again. Yeah, now those knees are facing a little bit more outward. That looks nicer to me. Okay, so now we have our idle animation. We can move on to the run animation now. Before moving on to the next animation, let's make sure that this shield has been clicked and that check mark is there. And then we can go ahead and start the new one. So let's click New Action, and we'll call this one Run underscore Loop. Press A to select all the bones. So this actually duplicated the previous animation, so I'm going to box select everything that's away from the first frame, press X, and I'm going to delete all of those keyframes. And for this run animation, I'm going to be basing it off of this run cycle key poses image here. You can Google run cycle and use this one as well if you'd like. Or you can just follow along with what I'm going to try to do here. So numpad 3 to go to side view, and then numpad 9 to go to the right side. So let's start with the legs. So I'll grab that IK target G, R, just try to rotate and position it kind of similar to that graphic. I'm not going to exaggerate it quite as much. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit more contained. I'm going to rotate this body bone forward a little bit, just like that, and then this right arm can come forward. Grab that left arm bone. Okay. We will get the forearms later. Let's just focus on the side view for now. Okay, that's pretty good for frame 1. So now let's move to frame 3. All right, so now let's move the body down a little bit. So GZ, just down a tad. Then this left foot kind of comes to the floor like that. All right, and then this right foot comes in a little bit more, maybe rotate it forward a little. Yeah. Okay, so we can rotate these a little bit closer to the center. I think the body comes a little bit farther forward. And let's rotate the head forward too, just a little bit. Okay. That looks good. So now let's move to frame 5. So now the right foot is going to be forward like this. The body bone actually is going to go up a little bit again too, back to kind of where it was initially. And now this left foot, that toe is going to be kind of touching back like that. Now this right arm is going to be starting to go to the back, and then the left arm will be coming forward like that. And then I'll keep these rotations on these the same for now. Okay, and then we'll go to frame 8. So now this is a little bit farther forward, kind of rotate that heel out a little more, okay. And then this foot is off the ground now too. And we'll rotate that back. And we can rotate these arms out a little bit more. And I'll rotate this body and head back a little bit as well. I'm actually going to move the body up a little bit too. GZ, move that up. Okay. So now we are going to make it so that if you press A, see all this, we're going to loop this, but on the opposite direction. So it'll start at frame 12. So press A to select all of these keyframes that we've made already. Press Control C to copy them, and then press Control Shift V to paste them, but with the rotations flipped. So you can see that it's now a complete run cycle. We just have to press double A to deselect everything, then press this dot up here to select this frame. We're going to go 4 frames past this, so 1, 2, 3, 4, so 23, and Shift D, put this here, and then to make this loop properly, we'll go 1 frame before this last one here, so set the end to 22, like that. One last thing, press A, Shift E, and make cyclic. That's just going to make it a little bit smoother. All right, and then let's press space and see what we got. Okay, and it's not bad. Now we just want to add in the forearm rotations. So let's do that. So real quick, I'm going to click both of these. If it's not the first frame, I'm going to delete it right now, and then we'll go to frame 1, and let's start setting these. So for this front arm, I'm going to do R. If I press R and Z, it rotates it in the global Z axis, but if I press R, Z, and Z, it rotates it in its local Z axis. It kind of takes into account this upper arm rotation as well. So all of these forearm rotations that I'm going to do with R, Z, Z. So just R and then press Z twice. So R, Z, Z, Let's bring that form in a little bit. And for this back one, RZZ, let's bring that one in too. Okay, and then to frame 3. Now we want to bring them back out a little bit so they don't collide with the legs. Yep, RZZ. Okay, frame 5. Actually, those look pretty good, so I'm just going to keep it the same for 5. And then 8, we can start bringing them in a little bit more again. All right, so again, I'll bring this to 12, and then I'll just box select all of, oh wait, no, I want both of these selected. So I'll box select all that, Control C, and then Control Shift V. And then again, we have to select this first frame and put it back at the end. So I'll just Shift D and then put that over on frame 23. Okay, so now let's see how that looks. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. So let's go ahead and click this shield icon, and that is our run animation. With our animations made, now we can start thinking about exporting this model to Godot. And we're just going to do a couple small things before we actually export it here. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our looping animations and we're going to shift them over to the left 1 frame so that they all start at frame 0. Because if it starts at frame 1, when we import it to Godot, it's going to stutter a little bit. So we just want to do that with our looping animations. So I'll press A up here to select all the bones, then A down here to select all the frames, G, and drag it to the left 1 so that it starts at frame 0. And I'll do the same thing with the idle loop. Press A, G, drag it to the left 1. All right, perfect. Now we can go back over to the Layout tab. Earlier in this video, we set the object origin of the mesh here to the world origin, and we're going to want to do the same thing with the armature here. So press Shift S, cursor to world origin, just to make sure that the 3D cursor is down there, and then in object mode, go ahead and left click the armature, then right click, set origin, origin to 3D cursor. Okay, and then the last thing that we're going to do before we actually export is we're going to assign a color to this mesh. If I press Z, material preview, this is the default color of the material that we're going to be exporting the mesh with, but we want to give it a color when we import it to Godot. So I'm going to click the mesh, click this red ball icon down here, click new, click base color, and then I'm going to drag it to this red color right here. So this is the color that it'll have now when we export it to Godot. And now we can actually export it. So make sure that these references are hidden here, like I have them. Press A to select the armature and the mesh. File, go to export down here, GLTF 2.0, and there's a couple settings to select here. Limit to selected objects. Make sure that +Y up is selected there. Geometry, mesh, select apply modifiers, and then in animation skinning, select export deformation bones only. That's just going to make it so that our IK target and IK pole bones don't appear in the engine because it's not necessary for them to appear. They would just get in the way. So go ahead and export it, and then we can hop over to Godot. I've got a new Godot 4 project opened here, so let's do a couple things to set this up before we import the character. Go up to Project, Project Settings, Input Map. I'm going to add a couple actions here. Forward, back, left, right, and quit. Forward, I'm going to make the W key. Back, I'll make S. Left, I'll make A. And then right, I'll make D. Quit, I'm going to assign the escape key. Okay, go ahead and make the root node a normal node. I'll call it world. Add a mesh instance 3D. I'll call it ground. And then I'm going to make it a plane mesh. And I'll make it 20 by 20, and then go ahead and click this mesh menu up at the top of the viewport and click create tri-mesh static body so that the player can collide with it. And then I'm going to add the world environment and directional light that are in this preview scene here by clicking these dots up here and clicking add sun to scene and add environment to scene. Okay, and with that, I'll go ahead and save it. We can start importing our character. Go ahead and locate that .glb file that we exported from the end of the Blender section and click and drag it into your Godot project over here. Right-click the import, click New Inherited Scene, and let's make sure the animation's imported properly. Go to Idle. We can see that because we named them _loop, they are looping properly in Godot. Yep, everything looks good. Okay, I'm going to change the root node here to a character body 3D, and then I'll give that node a collision shape 3D. I'll make it a capsule shape, control drag that up 1 unit, give it a radius of 0.35. Okay, that looks good. And then I'm going to give it a camera. But first, I'll give it this node 3D and call it spring arm pivot. That'll be used for rotating the camera. And I'll give that a spring arm 3D. And I'll give that a camera 3D. Okay, and so we could see that the camera by default is facing the -z direction. And so I'm going to go to the skeleton 3D, transform, and rotate that 180 degrees. And then for the spring arm 3D, let's give it an arm length of 3. And we don't want it on the floor, we're going to want it more shoulder level, so I'll drag the spring arm up to about there. Okay, and then I'll save this scene and let's give it a script. And I am going to use the template that comes with the character body 3D, so I'll create that. I'm not going to use any of the jump stuff here, so I'll get rid of that jump velocity and these lines about handling jumping. For input and moving, I'm going to change these right here to the forward, back, left, and right inputs that we assigned right when we started the project. So change that to left, right, and that can be forward, and that'll be back. And then I'm going to make it so that when I press escape, it'll just close the window. It's really nice to set that up for when you're testing stuff. So func unhandled input, if input is action just pressed, quit, get tree, quit. Okay, now I'll go to the world scene and Control Shift A, I'll add low polyman.tscn, and I'll click play, select current, and okay, we have movement. Now we want to make it so that the mouse is captured and that we can rotate the camera. So I'll go back to the low polyman script, and I'll add a ready function up here, func ready, and then input.set mouse mode. And let's do input.mouse mode captured. And then in the unhandled input function, we'll actually handle that rotation. But first we need to actually get access to some of these nodes here. So at onReady var spring arm pivot equals spring arm pivot, at onReady var spring arm equals spring arm 3D. So if event is input event mouse motion, let's see, so if we're moving the mouse left and right, so the mouse motion in the X direction, we're going to rotate along the Y axis on the spring arm pivot. So spring arm pivot dot rotate Y negative event dot X, or event dot relative dot X times a small number because this is in radians. And then in the Y mouse motion, we will rotate on the X axis for the spring arm 3D. So spring arm dot rotate X negative event relative y. And then we don't want to be able to infinitely rotate on the spring arm, because then we can kind of like rotate infinitely and kind of disorient the player. So I'll just clamp that quick. So spring arm dot rotation dot x equals clamp spring arm dot rotation dot x, and then I'll do negative pi over 4 pi over 4. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Okay, so now we can move the camera, but the player's movement isn't lined up with the direction that the camera is facing. So let's add that. And we can add that just by going to this direction vector here. And then we just need to adjust that along with the, we need to rotate that with the spring arm pivot Y rotation. So direction equals direction dot rotated axis would be vector 3 dot up, so the Y axis. And then the angle will be the spring arm pivot dot rotation dot Y. Okay, let's see that. Okay, and now whatever way I'm facing, that's forward. Yep, movement seems to be going just fine. So we've got all the movement set up now. Now we just need to make the player animate properly with this movement. So that will be the final order of business. The first thing that we're going to do in order to get the animation working smoothly is we're going to make it so that when we are moving, the player is going to rotate in the direction of that movement. So we'll do that by rotating the armature node. So let's get access to that. OnReady var armature equals armature. And for a lot of this animation stuff, we're going to be interpolating. So I'm going to add a const lerp val here and give it a value of 0.15. We are going to rotate the player when the direction is not 0. So here I'll set that rotation. So armature.rotation.y equals lerp angle armature.rotation.y, and then here we need to get the angle in the xz plane of the velocity vector. So we can do that with this atan2 function, and we will use negative velocity.x and negative velocity.z to do that. And then here we just use that lerp val. So let's make sure that this rotates properly now. So it's always lerping smoothly, forward, left, right, back. Okay, perfect. Now we just have to actually put the animations in there. So we'll do that with an animation tree. So add an animation tree right here. I'll make the tree root a animation node blend tree and then assign the animation player to it. All right, I'll make this a little bit bigger. Right click in here and then let's add a blend space 1D. Open the editor, click this icon here. I'm going to change this from -1 to 0. And what we're going to do is right click right here, add animation idle. Over here, add animation run. And we will set, based on the player's velocity length, the length of the velocity vector, we're going to set this to a value between 0 and 1 based on max speed. So it will interpolate smoothly between the idle and run animation. So make sure that this is set to 0 and 1, and then you've got them on the ends here. So we'll go back to root and connect this, and make sure that that animation tree is also set to active. Okay. So now we just need to make it so that this value is set based on velocity. And we can do that by first, well, there's one problem right now, and that is the velocity doesn't actually interpolate. the velocity is either just on at max speed or set to 0. So we'll first have to make the velocity interpolate. And we can do that by changing, so velocity.x, we can change this to lerp. So lerp from velocity.x to the direction.x times speed, and then we'll use lerp value again. And then I'm going to copy this, paste it down here, and just change this to z, all three of those. Okay, and then I am going to copy it twice down here again. And then here, instead of direction times speed, I'll just change it to 0.0 for both of these, and change these to z. And now, you might not be able to tell, but there is some more interpolation going on here. It's not just setting on and off, but you will be able to tell once we set that value in the animation tree. So let's get access to that animation tree. OnReady var anim tree equals animation tree. And then we will just every physics process frame set that. So anim tree dot set. And then so here we just have to put the property path, and here we will put the value. So the value is going to be velocity.length divided by speed. Okay, and then the property path, we can actually click the animation tree, go to parameters. This is that blend space that we added, and then this is that parameter. So we can right click this and then click copy property path, and then go in here and paste. There it is. And there we go. We've got a smooth, low poly character controller. Pretty cool. Thanks for watching this video. If you made it this far, I'm impressed. And I'd also appreciate it if you could like this video and subscribe to my channel. Please feel free to let me know if you'd like any more of these tutorials, and if there's any improvements you think I could make. I'd really like to make more of them. Thanks.